Welcome back. Heated debates even as the break was happening there, but we're back now. And Mercy, I want to come to you at this time. You've seen some of the thoughts from some of our viewers. One says it's a political problem. We need a political solution. You're not a political player, which is why I want you to give us your thoughts on that. Do you think Mao must have a political solution?
Thank you. Mao is a complex. And it is as complex as it is a complex.
Wow. Yes.
And the issues are bigger than we see. They are deeper. They are rooted. And until we get to the root causes. In the Green Belt movement, we have what we call the tree problem. How we solve our problems. You have to start with the causes. You have to start with the effects and the solution. And you have to look at the sustainability. And we were doing a documentary last week of the work we have done in the Cherangani, Mount Elgon, and Mau. Last year we planted around 800,000. And we came across these Cherangani. They call themselves Cherangani. And he was telling us their ancestors, before they cut the trees, they would talk to the tree, make peace, tell the tree you want to cut this tree for firewood, for building this house, and they make an agreement, even if the tree doesn't
make an agreement with the tree.
And to understand, it's about to be cut for this particular purpose, so you make peace. And if you cut that particular tree, you will not be affected. You will not have a curse. And they also told us, any tree that produces any sap that is milk-like was not supposed to be cut. Nor could you gather firewood from such a tree, like the Mogumo tree or any other that produces milk-like sap. Because if you did, it is like cutting your own mother. So they protected those trees. So their ancestors had systems that worked. And they were like guardians for the local ecosystem. And they knew how to protect the land and the natural resources. But the game is changed. We have a mixture of people. We have farmers, we have grazers, we have people who are doing charcoal, who are logging. Thank God we have banned logging for now. We hope things will change after we implement the recommendation from the task force. But I'm saying we should set politics aside for the sake of Mao, because if we don't address the issues, we will have water shortages, we will have rainfall pattern changing, and we have seen that.
You've told us a beautiful story about cutting down of trees especially that have the milky substance, and the talking to the trees and so forth. What role does culture play in conservation?
Culture has been very strong for many years. But because of the rate at which we are developing, and technology is also overtaking us, it is changing slowly.
Does culture maintain, or does it do the opposite when it comes to conservation?
And which culture are we talking about? African culture? Or?
There are certain indigenous communities that were around these ecosystems. The initial communities, not the foreigners. They had a culture that allowed them to live in harmony with their environment.
So it was possible for the conservationists and indigenous people to live together.
Yeah, and we need to tap into this knowledge, indigenous knowledge, to know how it worked, and then we try to find a balance. As much as we grow and develop, how do we ensure that we are still able to protect our outer resources? Otherwise, if we don't find a balance, we will be killing the very system that supports everybody. It's a source of energy, it supports agricultural system, but again we need to look at the way we are doing farming in our country. Is it sustainable? Is it providing enough income for the communities? If it is not providing enough income, communities will not stop focusing on the forest resources to fill up the gaps. So we have to ensure that the farms the communities have can support their livestock, can support their families, can also be, if we conserve water and soil on those farms through agroforestry and planting bamboo on the riparian reserves, all these interventions will help communities become more sustainable. And we give time for the ecosystems to heal and to be conserved.
All right. Senator, you wanted to respond to what Honorable Kirwa had to say?
Yeah, but actually before I do that, I just want to pick up something from what Mercy has spoken about in terms of indigenous people. And sometimes we, the indigenous people, can be good for the environment and can be bad for the environment. Earlier on, I'd used a name of, I quoted a gentleman called David Solunye, who is actually not Maasai. What I'm made to understand is that he is Ndorobo Kipsigis. And I've just done a few searches on the Kenya law reports, and I find that there's so many people have taken him to court for conning him that he is an indigenous person, landowner in the area. I don't want to get too much so, and I'm not going to get into that. And I'm not going to get into that. Yes. But I mean, these are facts you can just get in there. But I think sometimes when we go back into our forefathers and how they were able to keep land and how they were able to maintain the resources, it will really help us be able to solve certain problems. I don't necessarily believe that a dialogue like my colleague here has spoken about will help us solve this problem.
And a cabinet paper?
I don't believe a cabinet paper will do that, because this dialogue issue, we've done it before. You know, I remember when the late William Olenti Mama was alive, there was a heated debate, you know, which eventually, and I think Mheshimiwa here was part of that discussion. I think what we need to do is to become bold and say, who caused this problem? If you look at other countries like Malaysia as an example, the former Prime Minister is in court every Monday. They recalled the former Prime Minister who retired, but they recalled him at the age of 94 to come and take bold steps, you know, and now Malaysia is progressing. You know, if you look at Kenya and the issue of Mau Forest, we've got those individuals who have caused this problem. We've got serious people who have caused this problem. Why not put them back into jail? You know, why not have them pay? You know, when you talk about compensation, why should we compensate people yet? And these are facts. If you get on the ground right now, you'll find so many people who have occupied land that Zakai Cheriot had allocated himself. Just listen, let me finish. The next one, the final one, please don't. The final one is an issue of, these are facts, but I will not dwell into that. But what I'm saying is,
the same point.
I will make the same point, but in a different way, which will still be the same thing. You know, you cannot say bread is black or it is always white.
You wouldn't want someone on another show to be talking about you.
No, I don't mind. If it's a fact, just be fair. But I think being fair to the environment.
Yes.
You know, these are things which are very painful to me, because when I grew up when the rivers were flowing. You know, I'm the senator of Narok County. My task is to defend the interests of those people. How do you tell me to or rather, how would you advise me to tell the people on the ground that, you know, cutting trees is a good thing? You know, it is not a good thing. That is why I've planted millions and millions of trees. You know, and I continue planting. I'm telling you, Maura, if you come to my home, I live in a forest, which is a man-made forest. So I think what we really need to do is that all of us have got to take responsibilities. And the government has got to be decisive in terms of this issue of the Mau forest, once and for all. Because if the government is not decisive, and that is why I'm against this issue of dialogue, I think the issue that has got to be put on the table is this. How many of you have got titles? Bring them. You know, let us open a public baraza. Okay, bring them. All right, and then the president should direct your cabinet secretary in charge of land, go sit there. The cabinet secretary in charge of the environment, sit there. Bring those titles. Stop everything else we are doing in the country. You know, let us solve that problem once and for all. Bring your title. Don't come up with any lame excuse that I have an allotment letter. My brother here will tell you, land is not given, you're not allotted land. You either buy it and you get a title, or you decide to become a squatter there. So really, it is a high time, and I hope that the president is listening, that we stop everything we are doing in this country, you know, and we resolve this issue of Mau forest once and for all.
Fair enough.
Dr. Mumba, there are pictures you shared with us. We'll call for them in just a little bit, and you can share more with us about those pictures. But first, Honorable Kipruto, as a former Minister of Agriculture, I want you to paint for me a picture of how much conservation, be it our rivers, be it our forestry, etc., how much it contributes to Kenya's GDP and the economic growth of Kenya.
Well, I may not have it directly off my head, but what I know is that there is a substantial linkage between what we do in agriculture and what is done by the agroforestry or forester as such. I also want to agree with Mheshimiwa. I've seen his forest. But I can assure you my forest in Kitale is bigger than yours.
You have bigger land than mine. But I'm happy there.
But on a more serious note, what I meant by dialogue, possibly I was not able to communicate well to him, is there should be a cabinet decision led by the president as the chair of the cabinet, and this issue should be dealt with finality. Otherwise, we are massaging an ego that is more than 50 years old. And egos, when they are massaged, they grow bigger. My take is we just need to deal with this issue with finality so that those who are illegally in the forest are removed. And those who have a claim to any parcel of land, they are compensated by the government. Remember, government does not change.
Should anyone be prosecuted?
Yes. Yes, I agree about prosecution, about making a decision. If somebody acquired 10,000 acres or 5,000 acres illegally, a decision should be taken by the government on what should be done on that particular issue.
But we won't see any arrests happening.
Well, I don't mind about arrests, but you know there are more than 1,000 arrests that have been done in Kenya today. I don't know whether we shall see light at the end of the tunnel. It is worrying. But what I wanted to put very clearly is that governments don't change. Administrations change. We are now on the 4th administration of Uhuru Kenyatta. We had Kenyatta administration, Moi administration, Kibaki administration, now Uhuru administration. But it's the same government. So it's capable of compensating on the heels of Moi and Kenyatta the senior, and also Kibaki if their heels afflicting our country. So let's not pretend that Uhuru government cannot compensate people if they feel they are aggrieved by the problems that were done by the previous administration.
Compensation, what does compensation look like?
Compensation means if you took away my land.
Are they given money? Are they given a house?
No, no. For me, it should be alternative land. There is still a lot of land in Nakuru, in Narok, owned by individuals in millions of acres. Why don't we buy it from them? Those who feel that they have a stake on land, those who feel that they have a stake on land, we give them land. Those who we know that they are now landless out of misadventure, they also pay for it by getting some kind of relief through SFT. That is how Kenyans were compensated at the beginning of time.
I think on the issue, I think on the issue of compensation, I see it completely different. If you bought land, and that land, I gave you an illegal title deed, it is me who should be prosecuted because I obtained money under false pretense. That is black and white.
How about if you have died?
If you've died, you've got people who you've bequeathed your wealth to. So let them be, let them be rewarded for that. And in fact,
they suffer for the sins of their
let me tell you,
parents.
When we came up with the new constitution, we were very wise. Because we looked at it, and maybe when we are doing the amendments to the Constitution, we should expand Article 226, subsection 5, to not only cater for public officers who misappropriate funds, but in the event that you cost the government to spend money, we should go after your properties. Because right now that article is only limited to public officers who are in office who use money. But in this case, if I took 10,000 acres of land, I allocated myself these 10,000 acres of land illegally, and I sold that 10,000 acres of land to individuals. It means that I'm, what do you call it? I'm a rich fellow, so I have property elsewhere. So the government should move and say, how many people gave land to these people illegally? We will go after your property wherever you are, sell that property and compensate those people, but not taxpayers' money being used to compensate an illegality. That will be abetting corruption.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Dr. Mumba, the pictures. Could we have the pictures up? These current pictures you're about to see on your screens were taken by Dr. Mumba. So, yes, take us through this. What are we looking at?
Okay, so this is October. Actually, it was on the 15th of October, I remember, 2007. What happened is that there were flash floods, and if people remember, there were flash floods just coming and thousands upon thousands of animals dying. Now, if I may just describe a situation. So
and you can also tell us where this is.
Go ahead.
Exactly. This is actually within the Masai Mara Reserve. So we were doing a lot of sampling on the river to really look at the quality of the water in the river when I used to work with WWF, the conservation organization. urbanization. And what was shocking is that, and perhaps let me just take you a little bit back and just discussing the issue of degradation. Now, what happens within a river system, because my background is in hydrology, is that when water starts to flow from a catchment area, it has what's called a lag time. It takes a specific time to get to a specific location. Now, when a landscape is degraded, rain comes, and now we're seeing a lot of, you know, high levels of frequency of rain. Rain comes, hits the ground, and literally flows at a speed that you cannot quite anticipate, and arrives much quicker at that location than anticipated. This situation was terrible. I've never seen anything like it, where, you know, just the smell of death, and I mean, it was really horrific. Now, what are the implications for the Masai Mara as a game reserve, which brings in a huge revenue for this country?
Billion a year.
There are huge implications. We're going to see that degradation, forest degradation, has implications, and also compounded further by climate change, has implications for other biodiversity. I mean, this is a beautiful landscape that people come, I mean, thousands upon thousands. It's photographer's paradise.
How do we begin to recover from this, Dr. Mumba? I know this was in 2007, but like you said, it also there's a ripple effect, the economy effect of it as well. The Mara brings in a lot of money. You put it at 2.2?
Almost 2.2 billion.
2.2 billion to the country's economy. Will we ever recover from this? And how do we make sure that next time it doesn't happen?
I think we can, and which what brings me to the conversation we're having. It's this issue of really having an open dialogue, and I really just want to pick up a little bit about, you know, one of the tweets that said, or keep politics out of this. We cannot keep politics out of a conservation or an environmental conversation, because laws are put together by people that people have voted into power, those that are supposed to be guiding them and providing the jurisdiction around management of an ecosystem. I remember when I was working with WWF, and I sat with the county council of Narok, and I was explaining to the elders, and I said, you know, and we had a board which was wonderfully crafted, and it was just showing the entire landscape, and I said, if this were a bank, this is how much I mean, the Masai Mara Reserve makes more money than Nairobi County government. It's phenomenal. Now, if this were a bank,
I wish that was true.
Then it did, correct?
Then it did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now, if this were a bank, how do we then manage this ecosystem to make sure that this nature gives us, you know, what we deserve, and we need, and sometimes we need to take a step back and not look at the monetary implications, because the actual long-term benefits of a better environment are much more than, I mean, there's even a quote that says that when the last tree is gone, when the last animal is dead, when the last river is polluted, then we shall realize that we cannot eat money.
Oh wow, repeat that again.
When the last tree is gone, the last river is poisoned, the last animal is dead, then we realize that we cannot eat money.
That's powerful right there.
We cannot eat money. Mercy, let me bring in, even as Zinzi really reflects on that particular bite, and get your thoughts on this. As conserving of forests, you know, will become quite a challenge in Africa as you look at an increasing population, but also the obsession with ownership of land. And I don't, you know, it's not always good to compare what's happening in Africa with Europe, for example, but it is true that whereas, you know, in Europe, many are satisfied paying rent all their lives, the system works in a way that you can pay rent and you have a safety net. In Africa, and I'm sure this is not just a Kenyan problem, owning a piece of land is so entrenched in the culture, in your identity and so forth. How will this balance out when, if we're struggling now with the kind of population we have, what will we be looking at in 2050, and would that make, you know, organizations like Greenbelt have even, you know, a greater job, or a harder job?
Statistics rather actually say by 21,000, Kenya's population will be about 160 million.
2100.
Yeah. 21, but the year 21. 2100, sorry, 2100. But we'll have about 160 million.
Land and identity.
That makes it even more important for us to look at our water resources and our sources, to conserve the few water towers that we have. The Kenya Water Towers has gazetted 13 more, so we have 18 water towers. They are looking forward to gazetting more. But I just want to echo on the photos we have just seen. That is just 1/10, or 1% out of 100. In 2050, if we don't take action right now, it's gonna get worse. We will be having those floods even during the wild beast migration. you'll be seeing all of them dead. But what I'm saying is that the politics are good when they help. And the most important for us to look at, in fact, I wanted to talk about the policies, the strategies that we have in the country. We are lucky that we have so many documents. If you look at the National Climate Change Response Strategy, it is telling the country that we want to transition to low carbon emission pathway. What does that mean? That you need to have forests that are sequestering carbon, where these forests, not the few trees you have planted on your farm, you require an intact natural forest, a closed canopy forest. That is what we are trying to debate on this table, that we need to, the little that we have left, the 7.5%, we need to protect it. It cannot go down, in fact, it cannot go up. Because this ecosystem supports water cycle, the rainfall pattern, how much rainfall we get for the farmers who are doing farming. If you look at the Mau complex, you have wheat farmers, you have pastoralists, you have people who are doing maize farming, large scale. You have small scale farmers growing cabbages, scales, all these crops, they need to be supported. But if you don't have the rainfall for that particular year, the following year you will have issues with food. If the following year is a disaster, and if you check on how the temperatures have been for the last 3 years, it has been increasing. Even if you see a lot of rainfall, it's been going up. The world is heating up. Mount Kenya, our pride, had 18 glaciers. Now they are less than that. The Aberdares, the ridges that we look up at every morning, they used to be beautiful. They are not anymore.
Mercy, how can we get Kenyans from the very top to the very bottom? How do we get Kenyans involved? How is it that we can make sure that, yes, President Uhuru Kenyatta can see how important it is, but also Mama Mboga can see how her contribution and how her efforts can help preserve Kenya's
conservation across this country and across the world has to be bottom up.
Bottom up.
Where the damage is happening, we have to create awareness, we have to have stakeholders engagement. And top down, the policies, the strategies are being done, decisions are being made at the top. They need to trickle down to where we need to find a convergence where the top-bottom approach and the bottom-up approach meet, so that we can address the real issues.
In day-to-day activities, are Kenyans keen on the environment? Because you see Kenyans on the roads, they'll finish a drink, throw it out of their matatu or their car, whatever it is that you're eating, you just simply throw it away. Are Kenyans keen on the environment, their own environment?
We have seen a lot of changes after the ban of plastics. Our markets are cleaner. And they are not as, the drainage system are not as clogged. The plastic bottles is a mess. The milk packets are still a mess. But at least from the thin plastic bag that we used to have, so many of them, they are reducing by day. But I want to assure you that Kenyans are good people, and I know they are listening.
Okay.
I have worked with communities for like 10 years, empowering them. And if they're able to link their livelihood with the conservation, if they're able to understand what you are bringing on board, and they're able to link it, that it will add value, that will transform their lives, that it will make a difference, they will be able to embrace it.
Okay. And
the approach of the Green Belt movement, where we create awareness, mobilize communities, involve them, work with stakeholders, it works very well. But we are only one organization. It's a bigger country. We have 18 water towers. We need everybody on board so that we are facing this challenge from all corners, from all angles. Fair enough. We are speaking the same language, that we need to protect our water catchment areas. Okay.
Even as we wrap up this discussion, remember 22422 is the SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak. We'll be reading your final thoughts, whether via tweets or SMSs, in just a bit. But Honorable Dama, let me get some of your last thoughts on this. There's some commentators, I believe it's either in the Daily Nation or the Standard, who feel that the government is beginning to move back on its tough stance, that it's now trying to negotiate, find middle ground in all this. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't believe that.
You don't believe that?
No, I don't believe that. I think the president is very firm in terms of conservation. He has told me that himself. I think it is thin line between letting the kids complete their school and in terms of conservation. And the facts on the grounds are, actually, a lot of people have moved out of the forest. And it's a bit
how are you aware of how they're rebuilding their life? Because there is that aspect.
No, let me tell you more. These people had homes elsewhere. That's a fact. They had homes in Bomet, they had homes in Nakuru, they had homes in Kericho. They're going back where
so
they
those who are saying they have nowhere to go to, you don't buy that?
Let me tell you, I don't buy that. Let me tell you, and you see, it's very interesting. And what I say is that we politicians are sometimes the worst form of hypocrites you can find. Because when I'm with my colleagues, they agree with me that, you know what, definitely everybody must move out of the Mau forest. But then when they go there, it is just cheap politics. But I can tell you and I can assure you, Kenyans, that I strongly believe that the president and the cabinet secretary in charge of environment, and also the chairman, their person Natembea in charge of that task force, they are focused. We just have to find a balance. I think the challenge we are facing is really how do we ensure that we do not create another IDP issue? That's the biggest problem in my view. Because if you see the post-election violence and those IDPs, some of them were paid, it became a business, I think the how-to is really the issue. But is the government focused in terms of conservation? Yes. And if they don't, let me tell you something. If they don't, we will go down in history as a generation that had the opportunity to save Mother Earth, but failed. But literally ignored and failed. And I can tell you, as far as I'm concerned, my actions were, I believe that let me be accused of having failed, but I don't want to be accused of not having tried to save them out.
You've become quite philosophical on this discussion. That's a new side of you. Dr. Mumbeven, as you give us your final thoughts, we keep talking about this minimum forest cover of 10% by 2022 or in 2019. Are we going to make 10%?
We can do it. We can. I mean, look what Ethiopia did.
We can, but are you seeing tangible steps?
I'm optimistic because, as I mentioned earlier on, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration is really around, restoring for the last 10 years of the Sustainable Development Goals. Kenya as a government is a UN member state, and we've committed to this. In fact, Ambassador Masharika Mau was responsible really for being part of the conversation on the Sustainable Development Goals. It's exciting. But what does that mean? That means that in the next decade, we have to show what it is, how much restoration is done. So answering your question, it is possible. It is possible that it can be done, and it's about a mass movement, and it's a bit about what Mercy said in terms of bottom up. And we can see that the mama mbogas are really happy now. You can make the kiondo bag and really sell and use that bag, which is a sustainable material and a biodegradable material, rather than using plastic. So also we have to realize that nature also provides green jobs, and that is a reality. And I just want to end by saying that I was very fortunate when I used to work in the Masai Mao escarpment area, when I met an elder from the Kipsigis community, and this mama looked at me and said, Musonda, in my language we have a word which is kondametet abek, which means the origin of water. If we're not careful, we may not have that origin of water.
We may not have that. That's a good place to leave it. Honorable Kirwa, and you've left us with something to think about. 1 minute, please. What are your last thoughts on this?
Well, my last thoughts is that all these efforts are useful, but they must be coordinated. If you do not coordinate, you are likely to create a disaster. Now, first, those who own land, for the sake of it, we must arrest them by giving them alternative investments instead of just investing on land. Now, the issue of microclimate that is created by canopy can also be said true if each farmer had to dedicate part of his land and even part of the terracing of his land to a number of trees for purposes of checking the flow of water, so that surface runoff moves slower than is the case today. In that way, you are retaining the soil on the land, because in Africa, we lose 3 feet of soil to the ocean every year. And this, therefore, when you see gullies in Masai land or anywhere in this country, this is a land that was level, but these gullies have been created by erosion, and this sheet of soil is going to the river. Finally, the formal and the informal institutions. I still maintain in Africa, as long as you allow informal institutions to clash with the formal institutions without creating an interface, you are likely to have a disaster for a long time. What am I saying? I'm saying we can do it through government, but we must also look for the indigenous ways. And one of the ways that is organic to Kenya is to use school children to inculcate the value of afforestation in today and in future.
Right. Okay. Mercy?
At the Green Belt movement, the late Professor Wangari Maathai used the African stool as a symbol to signify sustainable development. And she said the bottom represent sustainable development. And then the three legs, one of them represent sustainable peace, the other one good governance, and the third environmental management. And until we have those three pillars well anchored, and if you look at our constitution, at our big four agenda, they are all embraced there. But the action is lacking on the ground. We need to grow trees in our water towers, that is one. We need to empower our communities to understand why we need to protect our environment, because it is directly linked to their welfare and their livelihoods, and also their life.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, it is important.
I think my last comment really is to the President. Mr. President, your legacy now is only left on Mau Forest. The Big Four agenda has failed. So really, I believe that history will reward you, and the future generation will be happy that a president came to Kenya who was able to conserve the environment and save one of the biggest water towers in this country. This is not just a simple water tower. This is a tower that feeds the rest of Africa all the way to the Nile. So I beseech you, I plead with you to not to relent, to be able to move forward. And for those who are fighting, and even when I see such headlines in the paper that Mau leaders, Rift Valley leaders lay the trap for Uhuru, there's no trap. You're not coming back as a president. This is your time for you to really do your job and ensure that we protect Mother Earth.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take that as your last word, and thank you to all our guests who joined us today for this discussion. Ledam had indicated he'll need to leave like almost immediately because he has an interview. As we look at your feedback right now, 5 tweets, 5 SMSs, let's put them up on the screen right now.
This is your feedback. Thank God Jagush on Twitter, you say most of these people, the politicians, are egocentric. They are looking at how they will benefit if they are seen to have fought for the people being evicted. It is so unfortunate that everything is being politicized. You continue to say that Kenya is old enough. We should be having places where people are sheltered in case of emergencies, but we don't. Land has been grabbed by the few rich.
All right, this is another tweet. This one from More Fire, More Money. Mau issue is a political jackpot or suicide dependent on political interest. If we can spend billions on Huduma number census, surely we can compensate Mau settlers and conserve our environment. Raila lost Rift Valley due to Mau. Punguza Mizigo is the way forward. Okay, I don't know where the linkage is with that one, but anyway, there's always politics.
Okay, Karaoke 95. You say there are rivers also drying in Mount Kenya region, which have their origin from Mount Kenya and the Aberdares. Can we tackle the problem countrywide once and for all?
Okay, fair question there. Amwai Brand says we cannot risk the future of our environment to satisfy a few individuals. We already have enough on our plates in terms of environmental degradation to sit back and watch as we kill our future.
Governor 254, you say we owe it to ourselves, that to the next generation, to conserve the environment so that we can bequeath our children a sustainable world that benefits all. That's Wangari Maathai.
Or a quote from Wangari Maathai, possibly? Yeah, okay. 2243 is the SMS line. Mary from Dandora. It's high time that we take each and every risk and do away with this issue of Mau. But again, we need to consider our fellow Kenyans affected. That's the issue.
Malel from Nandi, you say if we have to move these people, let us not use too much force. We all belong to Kenya.
All right. We have Anthony Lendama from Mau Narok. Protection of water catchment areas is a must. We must have a talk within the two communities. Wengine walionua kutoka wa Masai. Okay. Another angle to that.
Chebi, watching from Baringo County, you say if Honorable Tobiko is serious on preserving the Mau water tower, then his eyes should look beyond Masai Mau. The Mau includes Kericho, Baringo, Uasin Gishu, and previous regimes settled people there like the Masai Mau.
Okay, and this is the last one, I believe. Dr. Odidi Owiti from Mageta Island. The political parents ate sour grapes and their children's teeth are now being set on edge. Mao must be restored at whatever cost, period. And that's a good place to leave it. Thank you once again to each of our guests. Mercy Karunditu, Senior Program Officer, Climate Change at Greenbelt. Thank you for joining us. We also had Kipruto Rapkirwa, ANC Deputy Party Leader and a former Agriculture Minister. Thank you for joining us. And also Dr. Musonda Mumba, who's the head of the Terrestrial Ecosystems Unit at UN Environment. Thank you. We also had Senator Ledama Olekina, who's dashed off for another interview, probably on the same topic.
Definitely. I'm pretty sure it's still on the same topic.
That's where we leave this. Willis is up next.
Yes, this being a Wednesday, we'll see what it is that he has in store for us. Let's take a commercial break. We'll be right back. This is Daybreak.
Thank you.